Welcome, everybody. My name is Chelsea Kennedy, and I am the Communications Lead at 𝐀𝐻𝐿. Thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, Strategies for Developing Children's Resilience. The power and importance of resilience is something we've all come to know in 2020 and 2021, and we felt this topic was a great fit for our families at this time. We are so honored to be able to offer this webinar to our families in collaboration with today's host, Sunny Verma. Sunny is the founder and CEO of TutorBright and a leading education and self-esteem expert. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A or the chat function at the bottom of your screen. We'll ensure all questions get addressed at the end of the session. Over to you, Sunny.
Thanks so much, Chelsea, and so great to see over 100 parents on this chat. I'm uberly excited today because what an awesome time to talk about COVID. Actually, let me take that back. What an opportunistic time to talk about COVID. We're in the middle of a global pandemic, and I think genuinely the most unsung individuals are our parents and our children. And I kind of want to start today with a quote. It's a quote from one of my friends. He said, "Let's not make the world better for our children. Let's make our children better for the world." So the question really becomes, how do we make our children better for the world? Well, one, we got to help them develop self-compassion. We got to help them develop self-love. And most importantly, we got to help them develop resilience so they can prove to themselves that they're capable of doing things far greater than what they give themselves currently credit for. And this is where it starts, right? It starts with resilience. Now, while we go through this presentation, I would love for you guys to participate in the Q&A. I do have some questions for you, and I do want to start with one question. I want to ask everybody here today, what do you think is the #1 factor of developing resilience in your children? What is one way that maybe you developed in yourself, and what are some ways that you're developing in your children? I'd love to see the chat. All right, we got some good things here. We got letting myself fail and knowing it's okay. We got open communication. We got teaching them how to deal with setbacks, encourage, allowing them to be free, being patient as a parent, allowing them to try their own, failure, allowing them to make choices, compassion. We got communicate. We got so many great answers here, right? So I'm going to tell you guys a little bit of the studies and the statistics around it. But as we go throughout today, I want to give you guys 2 major disclaimers. Number one, that I don't use slides, so I speak extempore. But if you guys have any questions or any ideas afterwards, I'm sure Chelsea would be more than happy to circulate my email. I'd be happy to communicate with you after. And number 2, that some of the advice that I give may not be for everybody. And what I mean by that, take it with parcel. If it makes sense, it resonates for you, for great. And if it doesn't, completely fine as well. Take what you will from this presentation. Now, as we go throughout today, I want to make one more thing really clear. Let's have some fun, right? A lot of times Zoom presentations can be a little dry and boring. So participation is going to be key, and let's enjoy what we're going to have with this 20-30-minute presentation that we have in front of us. So the #1 thing, right? I get this question all the time. Sunny, what is the #1 way that we can raise resilience in our kids, right? What is it? You know, and I think a lot of us had in the chat here. And the #1 way that we can raise resilience in our kids is that teaching them that failure is not permanent, right? Now, this is done through studies. This is done through a lot of different ways, but I'm going to tell you from my own experience. Actually, I'm going to stand up here, get a little bit more comfortable, right? Can we all see me okay? All right, great. So when I worked with kids several years ago, especially when I was a tutor of my company, I used to do this icebreaker with them. And in this icebreaker, I used to ask them 2 questions, right? And only 2 questions. The first question I asked them is, what do you want to be when you're older? Now, that's a pretty basic question. We've all been asked it before, right? And because it's so basic, I used to get basic answers. I want to be a cop. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a nurse. I want to be et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I want to be what my parents be. And it's essentially this rehearsed, regurgitated answer. And generationally, it really doesn't change too much over the periods. Now, I take the same kid and I ask him the second question. I say, in my hand is a magic pill. If you swallow this magic pill, you could become great at anything. What would you become great at? Now their eyes widen, their ears perk up, they stand up straight, there's excitement in their voice, and they say, you know what? I'd cure cancer. I'd change the world. I'd play in the NHL. I'd be a rock star. I'd be an astronaut. I'd do great things. It's quite amazing. I'm always blown away by the vast ambitions that I get to see in these children. And it's like amazing that our kids have so much creativity when we get them to think about their ambitions. But there's a truly sad underlying story here. I pretty much asked the exact same kid the exact same question. I said, what do you want to be when you're older? And if you could be great at anything, what would you be? Yet the answers are distinctly different. Why? That's a big question. Why do we suppress our hopes, our dreams, and our ambitions at such a young age? Now, let me tell you why. Sometimes when I do this, actually, not even just sometimes, many times when I do this, the guardian, the parent, sometimes the sibling, sometimes the teacher comes up to me and they say, Sunny, it's so great that you got my child excited about their future. It's so amazing that you got them talking about their ambitions, but we'd love it if you just toned it down a little bit. I'm always like, tone it down? Why do you want me to tone it down? Well, you see, we don't want to get their hopes up. You don't want to get their hopes up? Then what direction do you want their hopes to go? You see, in this life that we all live, including all you as parents that are out here, including myself, there's only two directions our hopes can go. They can go up or they can go down. So what direction are we pushing our hopes? And many times the parents will say, well, I'm not pushing their hopes down. And the question is, are we pushing their hopes up? Right? This is where the essence of life happens. This is where it happens. Let me tell you something. What I've noticed with children, many times when they go for their dreams, when they go for their goals, when they say what they really want, they're told by some sort of outside source that it's nearly impossible, that what they really want is nearly impossible. Us, as their guardian, as their parents, as their biggest advisors, you know what we have to do when somebody tells them something's nearly impossible? We have to tell our children, you know what, you focus on the nearly, and we're going to let everybody else focus on the impossible. Because in that little sliver of nearly is where the magic of life happens. It's in that little wedge of nearly is where you can stand up and fall, you can try and fail, you can try and fail, and you can learn that there's no such thing as a permanent failure. This is where the magic of life happens for our kids. Now, I'm going to backtrack here and tell you about my first student because I'll give you a little bit of context of how this happened. Several years ago, it was well over a decade now, so I'm aging myself here, but before I even started tutoring professionally, I was working as a management consultant and I got a call from my friend and she told me about her younger sister. Her younger sister's name was Nancy. You see, Nancy, she was in grade 12. She's at this point in that phone call, I remember them telling me she was failing grade 12 English. She doesn't try, she doesn't care, all these things about her. She had so many tutors, nothing is working. And they're like, Sunny, you know, you have a little bit of charisma, you have a little bit of spunk. Maybe you can like convince her that she could be better than this, right? I was essentially sort of like their last cry for hope. So I was like, you know what? I like making my profits, but I don't really feel like I'm doing too much good in the world. Let me take this on as a pro bono case. Let me have some fun here. So I decided to meet with Nancy. and let me set the scene for you. For those of you that are in Toronto, we met at the corner of Yonge and Bloor. There's a large library. It's just down the street from me here. And I remember walking into the library. And as soon as I walked into the library, my heart started beating. It started beating faster and faster because I started thinking, wait a second, well, what am I doing here? First of all, I was never really that good at English, admittedly. But more importantly, I'm not an educator by any trait. So what am I actually doing working with this kid? And I saw Nancy sitting in the distance. I walked over her. I introduced myself. I said, hi, my name is Sunny. She said, hi, my name is Nancy. And we sit down. I said, Nancy, you know what? I'm really excited to help you out. You know, perhaps be your new tutor here. Let's get to work. And let me give you some access to how this conversation went. She looked at me, and I'll never forget what she said, because this conversation changed my life, and it definitely changed her life. She looked at me and she said, Sunny, you know, it's nice that you're willing to tutor me, but I really don't even know what you're doing here. Tutoring never works. I looked back at her, and I'm now even more nervous, and I said, well, you know, you're in grade 12, you probably have some tests, assignments. Oh my God, you probably have an essay to write, right? You probably got some assignment to write. You probably have something we got to write right now. And she looked back at me and she said, Sunny, like I said, I don't know what you're doing here. I can't even write. I was like, oh my God, this kid is in grade 12 English and she just told me she can't even write. I started sweating from my armpits. My heart felt like it was going to beat out of the chest. And I paused for a moment. It felt like infinity. There was a pen in my pocket and I pulled it out and I handed it to her. There was a notepad in my backpack. I took it out and I gave it to her. And I said, hey, Nancy, can you write? You can't write? She picks up the pen, begins to write that sentence out. And as soon as she's done, I rip the notepad out of her hand and I hold it up and I go, ha, you obviously can write because you just wrote, I can't write. And she laughed. And it was like a funny little dad joke, right? But I said, listen, all jokes aside here, you've been taught it's better to never try than to try and fail. But guess what? If you don't try, you fail by default. Where would your life be if you just tried? You know, anything you're ever going to want to achieve in this life, it starts with what? The single act of trying. I remember looking at her face when I was saying that, and I could see that it was resonating. And she looked at me, she said, Sunny, but I'm a failure. It's like, no, you're not a failure. You may have failed, but you're not a failure. There's no such thing as a permanent failure. Trust me when I tell you this. Let's get to work. Let's try and let's embrace failure, because if you want to fail, you will succeed. You have to want to fail to understand that it's not permanent and you will succeed. Try and fall, try and fall, try and fall until you can finally run. And it was quite amazing because she actually bought into it. And it wasn't just her English mark that went up. Her overall happiness went up. All grades started to skyrocket. She went to the university that she wanted to get into. And it was quite beautiful. That's why I always want to start when I talk about resilience is failure. Failure is looked at the opposite of success. Trust me when I say it, it is not. It is the #1 stepping stone for success. So encouraging failure with our kids is the most important. Which brings me to my second point of resilience, and that is dwell in the good. I can't stress this enough. Dwell in the good. And this relates directly to failure. Let me tell you what I mean, right? Well, we're all parents here, or the majority of us, I'm assuming, are parents here, and I'm going to assume that many of us have kids over the age, let's say 3, so that means they know how to walk, right? What happens when your child is first learning how to walk? Let me take you back to when your child first is learning how to walk, right? You might have seen them stand up, they're a little shaky, they start walking over you, they start stumbling, and you're like, you call your spouse, or you're like, get over here, they're learning how to walk. You pull out your camera, and you start to say, oh my God, get back up, it's okay, you got this. And as soon as they get to you, you know what you do? You pick them up, you give them a big hug, you give them a big kiss, you put them back down, they're laughing, they're giggling, and you know what they keep doing? They keep wanting to learn how to walk. They keep stumbling and falling along the ways. And even though they can collect bruises, they keep wanting to do this. Why? Because we help them dwell in the good. We give them all this positivity when they learn how to walk. Now, the question really I like to impose on this is, what happens the first time our child falls at school? What happens the first time they stumble on their report card? What happens the first time that they don't perform well when we have these expectations of them when they're older in their life? What do we actually do with that, right? Do we treat it the same way? Many times we forget our kids are dying for us to dwell in the good with them. You know, a few years ago, I was working with this student, and I remember sitting with his mom. This is the 3rd time he was going to be attempting grade 10 math. And his mom looked at me, and she was rightfully furious. She said, Sunny, you know, my son, the first time we did grade 10 math, he got a 25. You can sleep and get a 25 in class. I don't even know what he was doing. Like, what was he even doing there? And you know, the second time that he tried math, he got a 47. He only got a 47%. Like, that's nothing. Can you believe this? Do you even think you can help my son? And I looked at her and I said, yeah, you know, like, first of all, I completely agree with you. It'd be amazing if your son could pass. It'd be so amazing if we could get him excited about school. It'd be amazing if he could pass. And her son was sitting right there. I said, but you know what, let me backtrack here. You know what I'm really curious in? Your son went from a 25 to a 47. That is a 22% difference. I'm so curious on how he made that huge leap. Her son's eyes start to perk up. I asked him, I said, how did you do it? He said, well, you know, I started showing up to class a little bit. Amazing. What if we showed up to all our classes? What if you tried just a little bit more again? What if we dwell in the good? What if we can dwell in these micro levels of improvements? Because you see, micro improvements lead to macro results. Let me work with your son in seeing these habits, these behaviors and actions that he has placed already, and let me help him double down on them, because then not just his grades will skyrocket, he will start to feel good about himself. And this becomes such an important part when our children fall, right? You know, the #1 form of punishment in our country is called detention. Right? It's at school, in home, it's, you know, to be honest with you, it's typically grounding in North America. Now, if you actually really think what is detention or what is even grounding, right? Well, detention comes from the word detain. It means when you take somebody in isolation and you want them to reflect on 3 things. You want them to reflect on, hey, what did you do wrong? Why did you do it wrong? And how will you never, ever, ever do this again? You know, admittedly, back in the 90s, I was sometimes a student of detention. Sometimes they even had me write it down. I'll never, ever do this again. I'll never, ever do this again, right? The question, well, the truth is, I think this is good. I think it's really important to reflect on your mistakes. I think it's really important to reflect on how you can improve in your life. But my question on it then is, what happens when our child does something rewarding? What happens when they do something amazing in their life? What happens when there's something worth praise? What do? Do we ask them to reflect? Do we sit down with them or even have them sit by themselves and think about the exact same 3 questions? Hey, what did you do right? Why did you do it right? And how can you replicate this over and over and over again in your life? Right? I'm not saying that you can't learn from your mistakes. You absolutely can learn from your mistakes. But what I've learned is that resilience is born in your victories, is reflecting on all the things that you've done to achieve your successes. So every time your child does something great, even if it's a micro level improvement, sit down and help them reflect on it. Teach them how to reflect on building their own esteem within their victories as of tomorrow. It genuinely can change their life. Now, the next point I want to talk about with resilience is actually one that is really important to my heart. And a lot of times it's hard to practice and it's easy to say, but it's really important to put into practice, right? And that is positive affirmations and gratitude. And the reason why I want to stress these is because we're in the middle of a pandemic. And back in 2017, a study came out here in Canada and said 73% of teachers feel that anxiety and low self-esteem are the most pressing concerns in their classroom. 33% of kids missed a school due to anxiety. 25% of parents took off their own sick day to help their child cope with their own anxiety. So these are 2 theoretically and in practice great habits that we can help develop in our kids. So let me walk you through affirmations first. Several years ago, I was part of this experiment called the Honest Experiment, where we took these group of teenagers and we put them in a classroom. And when they sat in front of their seats, there's 2 pieces of paper in front of them. I walked up to the front of the classroom and said, hey guys, so today you're part of this Honest Experiment. And the only thing I'm going to ask from you is 2 questions. And my only expectation in these 2 questions is to have you answer them honestly. Are you guys ready? You're going to have 1 minute per question. They all looked at me. They agreed. The first question I asked them, I said, hey, I want you to write down everything you want to change in your life. They all looked, kind of in the abyss initially, picked up their pen, started writing this out. The minute starts going. By the end of the minute, some had tears in their eyes, some of their hands were sore. We didn't even plan a 5-minute breather, but we gave them a 5-minute breather. And they went into the hallways. We brought them back into the classroom and the second sheet of paper is in front of them. I walk to the front of the classroom. I say, okay, guys, question number 2. I want you to write down everything you love about yourself. They looked confused, first of all. 35% of the kids actually picked up the pen and put it to paper, right? And those who did typically finished under half a minute. We reversed this experiment where we even changed the sequence of the questioning. It tells us where is our minds, especially at a young age. We're so good at self-critique, but are we so good at self-compliment? Because self-compliment is a beautiful thing. And it's not just I'm the best and I'm this. It is I am worthy, I am capable, I am okay. Parents, especially if your kids are young, it is so easy. It's harder when they're teenagers, trust me, but when they're young, to have them do the I am. 1 I am a day. I am happy. I am grateful. I am me, and I'm proud of that. That is so important to put into our kids at a very young age. It's a habit that they can carry for the rest of their life. Number 2 is gratitude. Gratitude has been shown to be the most effective measure in dealing with anxiety from a natural source. Now, there was a study done in the University of Pennsylvania where they took 3 groups of people. Group number 1 on a weekly basis was supposed to discuss things that made them more grateful during the week. So if something good happened, they wrote it down by the end of the week. Group number 2 was supposed to write about things that upset them during the week. So if something bad happened, they wrote it down. Group number three was just supposed to talk about random events that happened in the week. So nothing with any sort of emotion towards it. You know, by the end of the study, which carried for several weeks, group number 1, the one that wrote about the things that they were grateful for, the things that made them happy, you know what happened? Less visits to the doctor, believe it or not, which is quite unique, higher levels of happiness, higher levels of self-esteem. You know, group number 2 that wrote about the things that upset them, you know what happened? Panic attacks, more susceptible to depression, higher levels of anxiety, feeling doom and helplessness. These were the notions of expression that were happening from just recollecting what we were grateful for or what we weren't grateful for in our life. So how do you actually express and practice gratitude as a kid? Well, when they're really young, you can get them to write down one thing that they're grateful for or say it to you every single day. It could be even a family practice. I've heard kids say, Sunny, I'm grateful for my ceiling. I'm grateful for my heart. I'm grateful for me. I'm grateful for the sun. I'm grateful for my parents. It could be anything. And it shows us all these small things are actually major things in our life that we should be so proud of. We should be so grateful for. And the second thing, if your child's a little bit older, one of the ways that you can actually express gratitude, help them doing it, is getting them to write down a letter to somebody that they want to properly thank in their life. They don't have to read it to them. They don't have to even give them the letter. But this has shown to last more than 30 days, the positivity that can actually drive from this. I've done this with kids on the ones I work with. It is awkward. It is so weird at first. They always are like, I don't know about this, when they have to do their affirmations, when they have to do gratitude with me. But one of the things I noticed within, a month, they start to buy into it. Within about 3 months, it is part of their habits. 6 months later, you're like, what happened to my kid? How did they get so confident? How come they feel so good about themselves? Why are they treating me even better? These are the beautiful things that we genuinely need to start to put into our kids. Now, I know we want some time for Q&A. We're at 12:23. Chelsea, do I have a little bit more time here?
Yes, you do. You can have 10 more minutes or so.
Okay, cool. Are we all okay with that? Great. Awesome. Great. All right, let's do it. Okay, so hold on, there we go. Okay, so I want to talk about 2 other parts, right, that I think are super important for building resilience in your kids. And the first one is quite unique, and I'm going to admittedly say that I didn't learn this until my 20s. Maybe you guys didn't learn this until your 20s as well, but it's goal setting. Goal setting. We don't learn goal setting in school. We're talking about having goals, but how do you actually set goals as a kid? Do you even care about goals? I didn't really start caring them when I started realizing I need to make a living in my life, right? And that doesn't happen until maybe you're in the college, university, or maybe in the later high school years. Now, with goal setting, I learned the hard way. I'm going to tell you how I learned the hard way. When I first started working with kids, I was like, I'm going to set goals with them. I remember walking into a household, and I was working with a kid who was dealing with grade 11 English. I said, okay, what's your goals for English? And the kid was a little bit more reclusive. This is not every kid, by the way, but he was a little bit more reclusive. He's like, I don't know, maybe a 50 would be nice. I was like, okay, so is that your goal? He's like, yeah, I'd just like to pass. I was like, this is so not impressive. I don't think his parents are going to be very happy with me that we're setting a goal to just get a 50. The next time I started working with kids, I was like, I have to find a more creative way of asking them about their goals, especially if they're, in those ages where they maybe not want to think about their goals, and there's other more important things that they want to deal with on a day-to-day basis. I do something very similar. I sit down with the kid, and I have 3 columns. The first column is, what is your goal, right? And they only saw each column when I went through this. And I could get the same kid be like, I don't know, I want a 50, right? And I'd say, okay, great, you want a 50. Cool, we got a goal here, that's awesome. Let's say it's grade 11 English again. I'd look at the kid and say, well, if you were lucky, what would you get in grade 11 English? They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, if you were lucky, let's just say luck was bestowed upon you, what grade do you think you'd get? Like, I don't know, maybe 85. I'll write down 85. Great. Now the third column, the most important column, it said, how can you get this without luck? Their kids' minds usually get blown. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, let's remove luck. How do you think you can get an 85? This is where the brainstorming starts to happen. It's quite beautiful. They're like, well, I probably got to show up to class. I probably got to do my homework. I probably got to ask for help. I probably got to put in some effort. Great. Let's write it all down. And we tend to write it all down. And the best part is once you get them to write it down and get them to reflect on it, they start to realize it's all in their control. It's always been in their control. It's not luck. They don't need luck. They need them, and they need to believe in themselves. It's beautiful. You know what I do after that? And I can send you guys the templates for this because it's quite amazing. I get them to do what I call a commitment contract. And I say to every kid, I say, this is probably the first contract you've ever signed. It's going to be the most important contract you've ever signed because it's between you and yourself. And you know how it goes? It goes, I, the student's name, I'll use my name, I, Sunny Verma, want to get an 85 in English. And in order to do so, I am willing to A, ask the teacher for support, B, show up to class, C, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All the habits that we listed. And then I get to sign off in love. You know what I ask them, the student to do after? I say, every single day, I want you to read this contract every morning and every night. Now, a lot of kids don't want to do it, but those who do, my God, it's kind of crazy what happens to them. They don't even believe how their grades are going. I was working with a kid in grade 9 geography that was so reclusive and reluctant to do this. He got an 87 geography when grade 8, it was his like least favorite subject. It was amazing. And he's just like, Sunny, I don't know how I did it. I'm like, I do. You followed your habits, man. And he started laughing. And we're in it, the quadmester just changed in Ontario here. And we did it for his new classes. And it's amazing. He's like, I want to do it now because he can see that he's in control of his habits. Then there's multiple ways to incentivize kids. I can talk about that another day. How do you incentivize your kids to actually practice these habits and behaviors? But the first thing is just set it with them. And lastly, and then we'll leave it for some Q&A. And I think this is possibly one of the more important topics about resilience. It's building trust. Building trust with your kids. I can't stress this enough. We have to walk in our children's shoes. And the way that we build trust, actually, let me backtrack here. Let me tell you the importance of trust. One of my friends, he has a child who's roughly just under a year old. He's crawling a lot, his child. And he was telling me, he's like, you know, what's really interesting, because my son's crawling now, he's exploring our house. Every time he's about to go into a new corner or a new room, he always looks back to ensure that I'm there. It's like this umbilical cord that's not physical, but it's emotional, it's spiritual. There's some sort of connection that he always looks back and says, is my dad there? Does my dad have my back? He can't even verbalize it, but he looks. He knows he needs his dad there, right? Well, as he's exploring the house, the question really becomes, that's what we want for our children as they explore the world. As they first go to grade 1 or SK, or when they get their first car and they drive, or when they go off to university, or when they first backpack, or when they have their first romantic relationship, you want them to look back and be like, oh, mom and dad are there. Mom and dad will always have my back. That becomes so important. I was part of a really interesting study where we took these really successful people. We defined success. I'm not going to get into too much detail, but it was essentially people who had really high levels of happiness and had great economic wealth. Most likely what many people describe success as today. In this, we asked them the impact that their parents had in their life. And those who've had amazing positive impacts from their parents, we asked, well, what did your parents do? We're so curious, like, what did they do? And you know what's really interesting? It was never that they bought me a car or they paid for university or they took me to Disney World because I fantasized that when I was 6 years old. It was always these rudimental, regular, occurring things that they did with their parents. I can't stress enough. Rudimental recurring things like, you know, I used to go for walks with my dad, or I used to, you know, fly a kite with my mom every single day in the summer, and we just conversed. And I got to know her as a human, and she got to know me, and we built this like amazing bond during that. I always reflect on those. And you know, as their parents progress in age, these are the conversations. Remember when we do that? You don't remember Disney World. You remember those small little things. One person, I'll never forget it. He lived in a large city, and an hour away, one of his grandparents was in the hospital. So every single day they drove to visit him and his mom. And he's like, what my mom taught me in that car ride is that anything is always possible. She just kept saying it to me. And he's like, the reason why I feel so free today is because I remember that voice of her driving every single day with me year after year to go visit my grandparent in the hospital. And that car ride became the most fundamental things. So what I ask parents is say, listen, so many times, you know, with technology in this digital age, we're so disconnected from our children. Are we really? Can we play video games with them? Can we play basketball with them? Can we knit with them? Can we cook with them? Can we go for walks with them? You know, during this pandemic, we have so much more time with our children. I understand there's a lot of frustration. I understand there's a lot of anxieties, but your presence in your child's life is the most important presence. All these small things are not small. They are macro. They're the largest things that your kids are going to remember. It's probably what you remember about your parents and your kids are going to remember about you. It's what I remember about my parents, 100%. So I highly recommend parents, do what you can to spend amazing time with your children. And as the summer months come in, a good friend of mine says you only have 18 full summers with your kids, only 18 full summers. If your child is 0, you're probably going to have 18 more summers with them. If they're 4, you're probably only going to have 14 more summers with them. If they're 10, you're only going to have 8 more summers with them. If they're 16, you might only have 2 more full summers with them. It's scary, but it's beautiful at the same time. It's beautiful. Make these moments count, and they don't have to count by large events. They count by just sitting and being there with your children. So I want to wrap up there, and I want to leave some time for Q&A because I know I'm a little bit over time here.
No problem at all, Sunny. That was really, really amazing. Your passion for this topic is so evident, and I know our families have been really enjoying it. If you've had your eye on the chat at all, people are very excited. So we do have one really great question on positive affirmations. And sorry, just a comment now, if anyone has any other questions, please type them in the Q&A or chat function now, and we'll get to that. But to start with our first question, so this is the question here. For positive affirmations, should we encourage every minor accomplishment or only major accomplishments?
Minor.
Some people, minor? Okay.
100%. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Chelsea. I didn't mean to.
Just the rest that she said is some people say you shouldn't over compliment, but wondering what your thoughts are. She prefers to encourage her toddler with everything he does, big or small.
I 100% agree with that. You know, when we leave it for only the big events, we hold off that I need to accomplish something in order for myself to feel successful. When the journey is the process, the journey is something that we should be encouraging. So, you know, like I said, when a child's learning how to walk, they stumble. That first stumble is like, good job. Guess what? How many kids love learning how to walk? Right? It's amazing. It is such an amazing, I can't stress that enough. Even like if I stumble, I'm not kidding. Like if I do something, let's say I screwed up something at work, the first reflection I'm going to have is I already know what went wrong. Trust me, I already know what went wrong here. Most of us do. We have an inclination and a dwelling that's natural in our true nature as humans. But you know what we do? What's more important is to dwell on, hey, what did I do right though? Because that is my hook to want to try again and again and again. I highly recommend encouraging even the small things. There was a study done out of Harvard University that talked about grit and resilience, and the most gritty children were the ones who could give themselves consistent positive affirmations, typically because it was their parents' voice telling them that they are capable, that they don't need to accomplish something to feel really great. The small steps is what counts.
Oh, thank you for that. So we do have 2 more questions here.
Sure.
How do you support a child that has ADD? He's trying very hard at school, but it's more difficult for him than his teammates. How do you keep him motivated?
Oh, what a beautiful question. Well, the first thing with any learning disability, the first thing I think about is it a learning disability or is it a teaching disability, right? Or is it a coaching disability? Every single one. There's been 104 billion people who've walked this earth. 104 billion people who walked this earth. Every single one of us is unique. Our DNA has never been replicated. Like, who are you is very unique. We have to anchor into that uniqueness. Sure, kids, like, even if you have ADD, even if you're autistic, it doesn't matter what you have. It is so beautiful that you are you, right? And maybe you aren't learning the sport as well. Maybe you aren't doing as well academically. That does not define you. There's ways that we can find enhancement in our kids. It just requires a new tact, a new idea. I've seen kids who are nonverbal, and I work with them and just finding ways to communicate with them. Guess what? They started to become a little bit more verbal. And maybe they're not going to be the best communicators ever, but they're great at other things. And because we can show them these small things, they become even better at the things that they're meant to be great at. So it's okay. It's okay. I can't stress enough. If your child has any LD, trust me, it's okay. It's a blessing. I only look at learning disability. We should not even call them a disability. I'm actually completely against. They do not disable your child. They do not disable you. If anything, it just requires a tact, a different finesse. It means they don't fall into the norm. Beautiful, because none of us do. We are all unique.
I love that outlook. Thank you. Okay, so we have 2 more questions now. How would you suggest we go about affirmation statements with toddlers? Would it be useful for babies that aren't speaking yet? I.e., do we say the statement to them as well?
Yeah. So I don't know if there's been some studies where you can communicate when the child's even in the womb. You can give them love. You know, daddy can kiss them while it's in mommy's womb, or the grandparents and everybody touches them. There's a love. So there is something that's going on in this world that I could consider like a sixth sense. It might sound a little bit more, let's say, spiritual, right? Or more kind of woo-woo out there. You know how many studies have shown that this woo-woo stuff, these intuitions that you have as a parent to your child, the way you can communicate with them is not necessarily verbal. Like, I think sometimes the biggest barrier in language is language itself. Right? The fact that we need language to show love to ourselves or to somebody else. Saying it to them right now, there's something about that energy. You know, like when somebody's just smiling and they're just loving on you and you have no idea why, your child will feel that. Give it to them when they're born. Give it to them when they're born.
Amazing. Thank you for those tips. Okay, so this is another question. Can you give a few more examples of everyday ways in which play in home and play life that you can build trust or resilience in a 3.5 to 4-year-old?
Yeah. Okay. So 3.5, that's such a fun age. Oh my God. They're talking, they're playing, they're so curious. That's one of the favorite ages that when I get to work with kids. One is that, number one, their imagination is crazy. I kind of wish I had a 3-year-old's imagination. You know what? Building forts with them. Oh my God. I've built forts with students that are 3 years old. Like, hey, do you want to work? No, I want to build a fort. Great. Let's build a fort. And then we can do the session in the fort. We could pretend we're under the starry skies of, let's say, Morocco, wherever it is. Finding things that they love to do. Remember, we were all 3-year-olds at one point, and we wish we had more people to play with. That was always our thing. Oh, why does nobody want to play with me? When my sister's 2 years older than me, when she started to like mature more than me, when she was turning 5 and 6 and I was 3 and 4, I was like, I felt like I lost my best friend. I had nobody to play with. I was sitting by myself wondering like, oh, who am I going to play like my action figures with? Who's going to imagine with me? As a parent, imagine with your child. It is something that suppresses as we feel like we become more real with reality. It is one of the biggest limitations to our creativity as we get older, and tapping into your inner child is an important thing to do as an adult, but you can develop this in your child right now. So find things that they love to do. It could be throwing silly putty at the wall. Do it with them. Do it with them. It could be coloring in books. Do it with them. It could be building forts. Do it with them. That is one of the most fun ages where mom and dad, you're still their best friend. You're their best friend. Trust me, when they're 15, you're not their best friend. You're their best friend. And if you want to be their best friend, their greatest advisor, this is where it starts.
That's amazing. Thank you. So we have Erica. She wants to just confirm the main 4 points for resilience. So she said support failure. She's curious about what number 2 is.
Yeah, number 2 is dwell on the good.
Dwell on the good, okay.
Dwell on the good.
Positive affirmations and gratitude, and then goal setting.
Yeah, goal setting and building trust. Yeah.
Building trust, amazing. And just for everyone to know, we will be sending out a recording of the webinar after if anyone missed anything and wants to go back and watch again. One more question here. During the pandemic, she's been over-pampered by her grandparents. Now we have shifted to a different country. How do we say no to things to her?
So I'll be honest, my range of expertise isn't in children discipline. It's and I know discipline and encouragement kind of play in the same spectrum. There's every family value is unique, right? Every single family value is unique, and every single parenting thing is unique. That's why I said at the beginning of the presentation, some of the things I say may not resonate with you because it might go against your value system, might go against like how you feel that your child needs to be raised. Look, as a parent, you have the best intuition with your child, and sometimes change is, and you want them to, let's say, you want to start saying no to them. Sometimes that change is that the initial friction is really hard. Actually, anything that we're ever, even as adults, anything we're going to do where there's initial change, the friction is really hard. Somebody has to learn, you have to learn, and there's usually a middle ground of negotiation. Trust me, you're going to be negotiating with your kids your entire life, even when they're 2 or when they're like 22, it doesn't matter. But what I highly suggest with this is telling your kids no. The resistance initially is going to be very, very stressful. It is one of the most stressful things I hear from parents. You might want to bring in somebody else. Sometimes it's not the best thing. So parents' job is put a roof over their head, food in the belly. It's the number one thing that parents need to do. Teaching our children the disciplinary values. Sometimes it is good to get some cautionary advice there. It's not necessarily my forte on that.
Okay, thank you so much. So we have one final question, which will be a great closure for today's session. Sunny, do you have a way of connecting in the future, such as YouTube channel, website, or workshops?
Yeah, absolutely. We're actually running some really amazing workshops. A lot of my dad, when I was 6 years old, he had to declare personal bankruptcy. But to be honest with you, I never, ever felt poor growing up. It was actually quite unique. Poverty, I always say poverty was my richest experience because it gave me so much more time with my father. Now, you know, things obviously resolved. Many things became much better in our lives from an economic and a happiness standpoint. But one of the pedagogical approaches that my dad put into me is to think and grow. If you can think and grow in your life, you can accomplish anything. If it comes within. We're actually, and Chelsea, I haven't told this to you, and by no means am I promoting this or trying to, but if you're interested, I can send out that link because we're running parenting workshops very soon on that. They're about 2 to 3 hours, I believe, the session, and we're co-doing it, me and my dad. I can't wait to do it with him because it's going to be awesome. And secondly, Instagram is probably the best way of communicating with me, or email. Chelsea, feel free to, I'll send you my Instagram, Chelsea, so you can circulate with everybody. I also have printables in terms of the goal setting thing that I was talking about. I'm more than happy to share that with you guys, and you're all welcome to reach out to me with your questions and anything that you guys need.
Amazing. Yes, I will follow up with all attendees and make sure we share all of Sunny's information. We actually had one more question come through I think we should answer just to close the day. So this is from Vanessa. My son is very much a perfectionist and is sometimes very hard on himself. I'm just wondering if you have any more specific comments for encouraging young perfectionists.
Yeah. Oh, what a beautiful soul, you know. What he's doing is he likes to tie the knots, cross the T's, dot the I. That's not a bad thing. That is not a bad thing at all. What you have to do is gently grace him with it's okay if you didn't get it right the first time around. Perfectionism, the challenge with it is I need to get it right. I need to get it right. I'm not worthy if I don't get it right. The affirmations that come in here is it's okay if I don't get it right first time around. I will get it right. I will get it right. It's okay if I don't get it right the first time around. Programming this in helps reduce the anxiety somebody feels to show up at 100%. It gives them the leniency, I'll say the word gentle, the gentle leniency to progress. Now, this takes time. Perfectionism takes time. It takes time. And as a parent, sometimes perfectionism can be inherited by watching your, mom and dad are like super organized, super clean. Be a little bit more flexible with yourself and share your stories about how, maybe one day you didn't do the dishes, or maybe this happened one day. Share stories about yourself, because trust me, your child mimics the majority of things that you're doing, like it or not. You are their biggest role model. It's the greatest honor and the greatest obligation that a parent definitely has in this world. So I say, one is, as a parent, watch your actions and share these mistakes with them. So encourage them. And number two, help give them the gentle affirmations and encouragement that it's okay if I don't get it right first time around.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Well, that is it for the questions today. And I think I speak for everyone with saying that was so wonderful. And thank you so much for your passion and excitement for this topic. It was really, really inspirational, honestly. So I think that's it. And so we have Neil Harris saying your energy is awesome. Vanessa saying thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Everyone really loves it. So thank you, Sunny. And thank you all for being so engaged in this presentation.
Thank you, guys. Great seeing you all. Happy to connect again. Bye-bye.
Bye. Talk soon.
Bye.